John Carney, who's the finance and economics editor over at wonderful Breitbart. Let's start about the debt ceiling first. Who came up with that ridiculous term? If every year, like ceiling implies top, you can't go above it,
right.
But every year we're talking about raising it. What is even the stupid point of this thing?
Well, so originally, Congress actually used to authorize every single borrowing. So whenever the government needed to borrow money, Congress would vote on the issuance of debt. That obviously, as we started mounting up piles and piles of debt, it didn't become practical. Congress would have to be voting on debt every day. So what they decided to do is say, like, let's have a ceiling. But under the Constitution, Congress has to have a role. It can't just be automatic. So basically what Congress has done is say, yes, we approve of all the debt, but only up to a certain level. But as you pointed out, we always keep going above that level and then above it. And right now we've actually been doing something even more ridiculous, which we don't raise the debt ceiling at all. We just suspend it. So we go above it, but we leave it down there, which is, that is frankly pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, what a useless concept, but it's a trick, right? The left likes it though, right? Because they can use it as a rhetorical ploy, right? If you don't raise it, then you're, infringing on whatever. You're taking money away from grandma, blah, blah, blah.
I'd say in defense of it, there is one good thing, which is to say, it reminds us of how much we're spending. It is,
Okay.
Congress enacts all these different bills and they all have different price tags. The one good thing the debt ceiling does is remind us, this, you don't just get to say, like, I spent this much on this and this much on that. In the end, you have a whole budget. And you should look at that and say, okay, the debt ceiling is just another point of reminder that we're spending too much money, that we should really pay attention. It's a little bit like, if you go out to eat all the time, right? And you're putting it on your credit card. You might not notice quite how much remember when we used to all go out to eat sometimes? But back in those days, when we went out to eat, you put a
We're allowed.
You keep putting it on your credit card, and eventually you get that bill, and you say, oh man, right? Like, we went a little crazy last month. Perhaps we should rein it in. I think that's the function. It's like getting that credit card bill. It's the function of the debt ceiling to remind us that we've overspent.
That's fair. Although the Democrats always are able to win that rhetorical battle against conservatives every single time it does come up. But yes, I agree with you there. Let's get to the spending on that point. $3.5 trillion. We were talking to David Arsani the other day from National Review, and he said, just to put that in perspective, Obamacare, they did everything they could to trick people into thinking that it was less than $1 trillion. Like, they could not pass the $1 trillion mark because it was just too big of a number. And here we are, just willy-nilly $3.5 trillion, and being told that it's not even really that much money at all. Like, what kind of ridiculous game is this?
Well, it's more than that. Remember, we spent trillions of dollars during the pandemic. So the system is already flooded with cash. And now they are planning on, and this is on top of all of the regular spending the government does. But this is an expansion of $3.5 trillion. And frankly, it's even more. That's the estimate of what all these programs will cost. Wow. But if they end up costing more, they're not going to cut back on the program and say, whoa, we thought, we could do childcare for only $1 trillion, but it turns out it's $2 trillion. No, of course not. They're going to use the same kind of moral threat that always happens, right? Oh, if you don't fully fund this program, which we told you would cost half as much as it really does, then you're throwing children out on the street, you're throwing grandpa out on the street. So it's going to end up being a lot more than this. And it is a problem. The government should not be spending this much money in a non-emergency situation. Like, let's save some of that firepower of government spending for when we do have the next pandemic or the next war or the next crisis, the next financial, calamity. Not do it just willy-nilly regular spending. That seems a little bit absurd. There's some budget gimmicks in this $3.5 trillion and in the other $1 trillion plan that they're also considering that end the spending after, say, 10 years. And they do that for, so that it looks smaller than it is. But we know that spending will not end after 10 years. So in fact, we're authorizing a lot more than $3.5 trillion. Sometimes it ends after 5 years.
I didn't know that trick. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's one of the classic Washington, D.C. budgetary gimmicks where they pretend something will expire when they know that they're never going to really let it expire.
Wow, that was deep and insightful. I want more of that. Like, subscribe, get more.